Assalamu alaikum and good morning. Let us begin to read. Let us begin to read the running lesson, the address. We have already finished. The half chapter, and half is remaining. So inshallah, we'll finish it within in 2 or 3 video. I would request all the students to have the textbook in your hand and open page number 11. Let us read together. If you have any query, question, feel free to ask me on my WhatsApp number 7380759748. Every time she lives here, she takes something home with her, said my mother. So she was there thinking about Mrs. A's daughter was thinking about she was thinking about Mrs. Darling sitting in one place, and she just went into the state of nostalgia. She was there remembering that how Mrs. Darling was introduced by mother and how she was looking like. Right? She had only very transitory. She had very only fleeting meeting with her that last only for 1 or 2 minutes. Now she was there thinking, and she just went there in the state of nostalgia and thinking that how she was looking like. So she just went into the state of past, into the state of nostalgia, remembering her. Every time she lives here, she takes something home with her, and she would come to her house and she would take something with her, said my mother. She took all the table silver in one go. Table silver in one go. Table silver means cutlery, spoon, forks, bowl, all this. She took all the table silver in one go at a time. In one go means she took everything at a time. And then the antique plates that hung there, she also had taken the antique plates that was there hanging. She had trouble lugging those large vases or vases. There are two pronunciations, vases also and vases also. So she had trouble lugging. Lugging means to carry, difficult to carry, that is lugging. She had trouble lugging those large vases, and she took everything from her mother's house. And I'm worried she got a creak in her bag from the crockery. And Mrs. as she was very much worried about Mrs. Darling that she was carrying that much heavy bag with her, full of stuff, full of belongings, full of vessels, and she got afraid. She got fear that she might get creak. Creak means pain. My mother shook her head pityingly, and she was sympathizing her. She was taking pity on her. I would never have dared ask her. She suggested to me herself. She even insisted she wanted to say all my nice things. My mother told me about her that Mrs. Darling wanted to say all our nice things. If we have to live here, we shall lose everything, she says. If we happen to leave this house, we are going to lose everything. We are going to lose everything, she says. Have you agreed with her that she should keep everything? I asked her. So I asked question to my mother that if she had agreed with her that she should keep everything with her, as if that's necessary, my mother cried. My mother got very angry with me. That was it necessary to know all this? It would simply be an insult to talk like that and think about the risk she is running each time she goes out of her door with full suitcase or bag. And she was taking, it would be an insult to ask such question. It would be an insult to think about her, because she is there, whatever she is there doing for us, she is there doing for the well-being of our luggage, or for the well-being of our belongings, our materials, right? So let me now explain you in nutshell. Lugging means you are already carrying a heavy object with great effort. Pitting means feeling sorrow. Creak means cramp or space in muscle or pain. Her mother told her that whenever that woman came to visit her, she took something from the house with her. Table silver, antique plates, and she had trouble over carrying the large vase. She told her that the cramp in her back came from the crockery. Her mother shook her head in sorrow. The woman kept telling the protagonist mother that she wanted to save her precious things. If they had to leave the place someday, they would lose everything. She kept her mother. She asked her mother if she really wanted her to. She asked her mother if she really wanted her to take all things with her. Her mother replied that even if she didn't, it would be an insult to ask her not to. She was going out with a risk herself, suitcase full of items. I think you have understood it well. Let's begin to read from page number 12. My mother seemed to notice that I was not entirely convinced. I was not convinced with the way my mother answered me. And my mother had observed it. She looked at me reprovingly. After that, we spoke no more about it. Reprovingly means in a rebuking manner. She looked at me reprovingly. My mother was there looking at me angrily, and we spoke no more about it. And we had shut the chapter of Mrs. Darling. And I had no more. I hadn't asked her any question about Mrs. Darling. Meanwhile, I had arrived at the station without having paid much attention to things on the way. I didn't pay attention when I was there sitting in the train back and thinking about Mrs. Darling. I didn't pay attention what was there running around it. I was walking in familiar places again for the first time since the war. This was the first time afterward that I'm going back to the same place that I was familiar with. But I didn't want to go further than was necessary. I didn't go further because it reminded me about the war. I didn't want to upset myself with the sight of streets and houses full of memories from a precious times. I didn't want to make myself upset. And since because of this, I didn't decide to go further. Let's see. In the train back, I saw Mrs. Darling in front of me again. Again, the picture of Mrs. Darling came inside her mind when she was sitting inside the train. As I had the first time I met her, she remembered the incident that she had first time meeting with her. It was the morning after the day my mother had told me about her, and it was the morning time that I was introduced by my mother with her. I had got up late and coming downstairs, I saw my mother about to see someone out. A woman with a broad back. She had a broad back, and it was the early morning. I got up late, and she came to my house, and I still remember how my mother introduced me about her. There is my daughter. This was an introduction done by mother. This was an introduction done by her mother to Mrs. Darling. There is my daughter, said my mother. She beckoned to me. Beckon means isara karna. Called. She called me. The woman nodded and picked up the suitcase under the coat rack. She wore brown coat and shapeless hat. How she was dressing? The woman nodded and picked up the suitcase under the coat rack. She wore a brown coat and how she was dressed herself. Still she remember her. Does she live far away? I asked my mother, because she was carrying her luggage, she was carrying her belongings. So she asked the question, if she was living very far away. Seeing the difficulty she had going out of the house with the heavy case, because she found it difficult to carry that suitcase or bag. So she asked question, and my mother gave me an address of that lady in Marconi Street, said my mother, number 46. Remember that. And then remember, she also told me to remember that address, Marconi Street. And so there can be a question that where was Mrs. Darling was living. So she was living in Marconi Street, number 46 house. This was okay. Now let me tell you next in nutshell. Reprovingly, critically, beacon signal. Her mother noticed that she was not convinced and looked at her critically. After that day, they never talked about the incident again. She reached the station without noticing, and details on the way. She passed the familiar things after the war for the first time. She didn't want to upset herself with the familiar sight of houses and street that reminded her of all the precious times. Back in the time, she saw Mrs. Darling in person a day after her mother told her daughter about her. She woke up late. That morning, and as she was going downstairs, she saw that lady with broad back. Her mother was seeing her out. Her mother introduced the protagonist to the lady. She signaled to her, and the woman responded with a nod. She picked the suitcase under the cot rack. She was wearing a brown coat and shapeless hat. The protagonist asked her mother if she lived far away. The mother told her the address, Marconi Street, number 14. She remembered it. So this was fifth paragraph. Let us begin to read the sixth paragraph of this lesson. I had remembered it, but I had waited long time to go there. I remember the address, but I didn't want to go over there. I had waited long time to go there. Initially, after the liberation, means the atmosphere became normal. Liberation means everyone was safe and secure. There was no more riots. There was no war now. The war continued the war stopped. Initially, after liberation, I was absolutely not interested in all that stuff. And naturally, I was also rather afraid of it. I didn't want to go there. I don't want the possession of those stuff. Afraid of being confronted with things that had belonged to a connection that no longer existed. I didn't want those things because it reminded me about about my past life, and I didn't want to be in touch with those things that had no existence now, which were hidden away in cupboards and boxes and waiting in vain until they were put back in their place again. I didn't want to go and take their possessions which had endured all those years because they were things, and those materials had endured the hardship of the war, and I don't want those things. But suddenly something happened to me, but gradually everything became more normal again. The atmosphere became more normal again. Bread was getting to be lighter color. There was now everything was normal. Bread was available. There was a bed you could sleep in unthreatened, a room with a view you were more used to glancing at each day. And one day I noticed I was curious about all the possessions that must still be that address. I wanted to see them, touch and remember. So once the atmosphere became normal, right? When there was no riots, no fighting, right? So something happened to her and she wanted to go to the given address by her mother, and she wanted to touch her belongings, her luggage, right? And she wanted to remember those things, and she became so curious about it. So her curiosity compelled her to go and visit the given address by her mother. After my first visit in vain to Mrs. Darling's house, I decided to try a second time. The first visit already went in vain because Mrs. Darling didn't recognize her. She failed to recognize her, and she decided to go back to the second time. Now a girl of about 15 opened the door to me. She went to the second time. And when she opened the door, when she knocked the door, it was not Mrs. Darling but her daughter, and she was about 15 years old. Now a girl of about 15 opened the door to me. I asked her if her mother was at home. No, she said. She asked about Mrs. Darling, and she said no. My mother's doing an errand. Errand, we already had this word last year, errand, job that involve going out, such as sending a message, that is called errand. No matter, I said, I will wait for her. And she told her that it's okay, I will wait for her mother. And she decided to be at that house. And she was welcomed by that Mrs. Darling daughter. Let me now explain you. Liberation means liberty of free, endure, suffer, vain, hopeless. She remembered the address, but she took too long to visit that place. After the freedom, she was on one hand not interested, on the other was afraid. She was afraid of getting confronted with the past memories and connections that no longer existed. Connections were hidden in cupboards and boxes. It seems that those memories were waiting in vain to put back to their places, as they had suffered all these years because they were only things. Things were getting normal in the protagonist's life. But one day she got curious about all these things that were still at that address. She wanted to see them and touch them. After the first hopeless visit, she decided to try one more time. When she reached Mrs. Darling's home, a girl of 15 years opened the door. Protagonist asked her about her mother. She told her that she was outside doing some errands, to which the protagonist decided that she would wait for her. This is the explanation of 6th paragraph. Now let us be there on the 7th paragraph, which will be very easy to understand. Anyway, I will start reading from page number 13. Inshallah, we will begin the third video of this lesson. Tomorrow we will begin the third video, inshallah. The very next day we will be able to finish. This is going to be the last video, inshallah. I would request all the students to write the question answer. I am going to send the question answer through WhatsApp today, inshallah itself. And request you, very easy lesson. Even if you try yourself, you will be able to understand, sure. If you read it and if you practice it, you will be able to get full marks in English. If you have any query, feel free to ask me on my WhatsApp number 7383759748. Right? In order to make your English strong, you have to read this lesson. Very easy lesson. The address, very nice lesson. Right? Meanwhile, if you have any query, I have already given you the address. Contact me on my given address 7383759748. Meanwhile, Allah Hafiz.